It's time to clean up those null values. Go ahead and go to a new Colab notebook. It's colab.research.google.com and click on the new notebook link. Now go ahead and open up the data using the provided URL. I'm not sure if mine, there we go. And what you're going to do as usual, import pandas and check out the first 5 rows of the data. Make sure that it is what you expect. Now, this is a version of the bike rentals data set, but it's a little different because it actually has null values included. Okay, so there we have the data. We've seen this before. Now let's go ahead and address the situation of null values. The first question is, hey, does my data set have null values? Well, I often use df.info for this. And so if I look at these non-null options, you can see that there's 731 entries. So whenever it's not 731, you can see some different values. That indicates the null values are present. If you want a more direct method, you can try the df.isNull option. See, there it is. Let's do this now. And then you want to do, you can do .sum. And you can see that it's summing the null values per column. So that's a nice way to look at it. Note that wind speed seems to have the most at 5. Some of the others only have 1. And you can also, so if you want to know what's my total number of null values, right? You can do isNull.sum, right? It's kind of fun. 2 sums, and you can see there are 12 null values in total. Now, I personally like to know, like I want to see them. Like I want to know where they are. Okay, I see that they're there, but how in fact do we find them? You know, the null values, like are they all in the same row? If so, maybe we just eliminate the row. Are they scattered throughout the entire data? Is there something about the rows of null values that we can in fact look at? So the way that you do that is the following. It actually uses something called, well, I think of it as conditional brackets. I don't think that's the proper name. It does have I think an official name. But look at this. If you do df and then you put brackets in there, you can set up a condition. Okay, I'm going to change this, but you can set up a condition that narrows the data frame. So the condition that we want here is the presence of null values. Okay, so how do we get the presence of null values? Right? It's different than summing them. Well, what we want to do is something like this. The condition is df.isNA, okay? And so basically that's narrowing it down to the null values, okay? So we want the data frame such that, you can think of it as a such that there are null values present. And we want to use .any, okay, meaning any null value, and we're going to do it via column, which is standard. So axis equals 1 is actually column, axis equals 0 is row, right? Because it's row and then column. So it's a little cumbersome, but it should do the job. Let's try this. Press Shift Enter. And you can see that it does show all, it's kind of weird because we say it by column, but it shows you all the rows of null values, right? So if you scroll over here, look at the wind speed ones that are missing. Okay. All right, so we know that there are null values here now. We've looked at it multiple ways that you can actually see it. And the next step is going to be to fix them. Okay, so we want to look at how to fix null values. Now, go and title the notebook null values. And what are we going to do to fix them? Well, let's tackle them one at a time. And I think the first thing to look at is actually the column with the most null values. I like a column first approach. So this would be the wind speed, right? Because there's quite a few. So when we think about, okay, like let's just assume in this case, hey, there's valuable information in these columns. We don't want to lose them, okay? So let's assume that we're not going to take the approach of eliminating them. We're going to replace them, okay? So how would we do that? Well, first we'd have to decide what to replace them with. So let's look at .describe, okay? Let's look at how is the data distributed, and that will help us get a good sense. So we can just try df.describe and look at it for everything in this data set. And if I go over to wind speed, it's kind of far down. I don't like to scroll. If we're going to be explicit with wind speed, we can just do df wind speed. How do we do that? You know, sometimes when you do code, it doesn't give you the desired output. You can always modify it a little so it does. See, you can do that for the full data frame or for an individual column. There now it's just more centered, right? It's easy to see. So you can see it's got a mean of 0.19. It has a median of 0.18, pretty close. I think in general the median is a safer bet, right? Because it's really the mean that can be problematic if you have very skewed data. So let's go ahead and replace the wind speed null values with the median of the column, okay? All right, so how do we do that? I should have been putting comments in here. Let's go ahead and put one in. This is a big one. Actually, let's do a header. Okay, I think it's big enough. So text header, replace wind speed column with median. That's just wind speed null values. It's not like the whole column. Place, okay, shift enter. Now let's write the code to do that. All right, so first thing you need to think about is I want to access the column, okay? So that's df bracket wind speed, right? Shows as an option, press return. Okay, now sometimes I honestly forget, what is the right syntax for this? It's actually fill in a, okay? So it's dot fill in a, and then what goes in there is what we're going to switch it with. If it was like when you have it up in front of you like this, okay, like we've got it here, you could just put in 0.18. Okay, like you totally could do that. Right, there it is. I mean, it's not exact, but does it need to be exact? And that's going to do it. And you'd also want to put in place equals true, because when you do that, it's going to actually replace the whole, data frame. But let's do it in the spirit of like being exact. Maybe we don't have that information. So I'm going to put in df wind speed dot median. Okay. Press shift enter. Go ahead and do that. I think it's a little cumbersome, but you get used to it after a while. And this is pandas is often like this, but they're stringing little parts together. Okay, so did it work? Well, we need to find out, right? And there are different ways to find out, right? Because we saw the different ways to check for the null values. Let's try this df.isNull.sum to see what the sum of the null values are in the wind speed column. If we scroll down, look at that. Wind speed 0, no null values. Now the second thing we can do to close this out is to make sure that it was basically correctly changed. So any ideas of how to do that? Well, let's go back and look at here, the null values, right? And so these are different rows here. Like there's row 56. See how it's NaN? Let's just look at the first three here. 56, 81, and 128. So can we look at those Sure, right? We can look at rows. Those are the indices, which are basically the same as the name here. So 56, 81, and 128. So if I want to check, I can use, in this case, I can use like lock or ilock because it's the same. Just do df lock. I already forget, was it 56? Let's see if that works. It does, and it shows the wind speed. Look at that, right at the value that we want. Cool. Okay, let's see if it'll take a list as input. So 56, 81, 128, 56, 81, 128. I don't know if it will. 56, so let's just try things. 81, 128. Cool, it does. Okay. So again, we can scroll, and it looks like a data frame now, just kind of nicer for viewing. You can see they all share the same wind speed, which is the median. Really cool, right? And so that's an introduction to null values. This shows you both how to find out if you have them, find out how many you have, shows you a way to correct them, and a way to verify your corrections. Job well done.